All right, everyone, JR here from HolyFaith Media. I'm coming to you from Niagara Falls, Canada. And I know that I have a lot of new subscribers that have subscribed to the channel lately. I think we've grown by about 1,000 subscribers over the past week. So let me talk about this program. What is this program, Catholic in a Car? Well, I come on here and talk common sense about the Catholic faith, and specifically from a, quote, traditional Catholic faith. Recently, we've been talking about the way that women dress at the traditional Latin Mass. And it becomes apparent that many of you, some of you, I should say, do not actually watch the video before commenting. I had a few comments on the last video where people are thinking that I'm being critical of women in particular at the Latin Mass, and thinking that I am criticizing those who have a lack of modesty. And that wasn't the purpose of my last video, and in fact, that's not what I'm saying. If anything, I'm being critical of the male perception of the way that certain women dress that go to traditional Latin Masses. Now, first off, I would like to send a thank you to Father Richard Heilman and Doug Barry, who apparently, although I haven't seen the clip, mentioned HolyFaith Media on the Grace Force podcast. And I hope you'll check out the recent interview that our good friends Joe Picillo and Joe Resinello here on HolyFaith Media conducted with Jesse Romero, called Encounters with the Devil. Very good stuff, guys. I highly recommend you check that out if you haven't already. But anyways, on to our content, what we're talking about today. I find that many times men are overly critical of women, the way in particular that they dress that go to the Latin Mass. Oftentimes they blame their problems, their issues with lust on the way that women dress. And I'm sick and tired of women taking all the blame or all of the guilt onto themselves for issues that men have with lust. What am I talking about? You know, some men are the first to complain when they see a woman walking into the chapel not wearing a chapel veil on. Or if, God forbid, if somebody shows up with jeans on, they act like they just can't control themselves because a woman in front of them is wearing jeans. If you have that big of a problem, brother, you have some major spiritual issues. If you cannot control yourself for 1 hour at a Mass, then you really need to seek out some spiritual counseling. Now, I'm not advocating that women show up necessarily in jeans. I think it's a great thing when, you know, a female dresses appropriately for the traditional Latin Mass, including veiling and including wearing a skirt. I don't think it's strictly necessary. And some people will disagree with me on that. The kingdom of God is not about the way that somebody dresses. It's not about a person's clothing. Obviously, I don't think that somebody should dress up like a bimbo that's going out to a dance club on a Saturday night. And I would tell people to avoid even going to those clubs altogether. However, we make these small t traditions sometimes that really have nothing to do with the faith. I've always been amazed at some of the people that argue that women strictly must wear a skirt and that men's apparel, such as jeans, are not to be worn by women. Well, the definition of what is man's clothing and what is women's clothing has changed over the years. It's become blurred. I mean, most men would not wear the things that the average Englishman wore back in the 1700s. He would be looked at as a little you-know-what today if he were to walk around with that clothing on. I think that sometimes parents in traditional communities, I think that they take things a little bit too far, and they're overly stringent about the way that they dress their children. That was the point that I was making in the last video. I think that oftentimes the children, the young women, they'll grow up to resent when they're out on their own, when, let's say, they go off to college, or maybe they stay home for college, but at some point they're going to be out on their own. Oftentimes they do, if they're pressured too much to act a certain way, to dress a certain way, then they will go completely to the opposite when they leave the house. And that's not just amongst Catholics. That's also amongst Pentecostals or any other conservative religious tradition out there. I know a Muslim lady who I used to be the manager of. Basically, that's what happened to her. She grew up in a very fundamentalist Muslim family. When she got a little bit of freedom behind her parents' back, she did the same thing. She actually went, I don't know, for lack of a better term, she went crazy when she left the house because she was so controlled growing up. And especially here in the West, they imported many of their cultural traditions here, and she wanted to be more westernized or modern. So that is definitely a danger amongst Catholics as well, people that go to the Latin Mass communities. And I've seen a few examples of it myself. As far as men go, if you have trouble with issues regarding lust, I don't think the female's attire is necessarily going to help you out too much. I advocate if you have issues with that, then maybe you want to start keeping your head down, sit in a different place in the parish during the Mass where those things aren't going to be a distraction. I mean, luckily in the parish where I go to the Latin Mass, there's not too many ladies that you would really want to look at in that manner anyway. However, there's still a couple, and I mean, yeah, it could be a problem even for myself. So I try to focus on either staring at the floor or keeping my attention towards the altar, and I find that helps me tremendously. I know of a lady that I used to see here in Ontario, and she came from a very strict religious Catholic upbringing, and they attended the Latin Mass all of her life. But she was telling me a story one time of how she went, I think it was in Calgary, if I'm not wrong. She had no transportation to Mass other than to take her bicycle, and it was often, I think it was either after work or before work, something like that. But in any case, her only method of transportation was to take her bicycle there. And of course, it's not very convenient to wear a long skirt when you're on a bicycle. And sure enough, when she showed up to the parish, she had some people behind her back, of course, that were complaining about her attire showing up to Mass. And the priest actually stood up for her. It was a priest of the Society of St. Pius X that stood up for her and said, hey, would you rather her not come to Mass whatsoever? And I think that this particular girl had at least a little bit of resentment towards traditional communities in general because of things like this. And I don't think that she is the only one that would have these types of issues. So I think we have to be very careful in the things that we prop up as being part of the faith. And we have to be very careful that we don't push people further away from the Latin Mass than we do in bringing them in. Another thing is, can people not even say hello to newcomers to the Latin Mass? I find that is also often an issue. I was hearing a story the other day of a lady that just started going to a particular Latin Mass parish, and she claimed that apparently people were giving her weird and dirty looks. So we also have to be a little bit inviting. And I'm not saying that you need to be at the back of the church and shaking hands and kissing babies when they come in, but it's not going to kill you to say hello and maybe introduce yourself and maybe take that person and introduce them to somebody else. There's some people that do this very well. Some people are naturally a little more shy than other people, and that's fine. But we are a community, we are a church, and we need to come together and support each other in our walk with Christ. I'm not going to beat the subject up anymore. Let me know. There's probably a few more things I probably would like to add to this, but let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope to talk to you all again soon, and that's all for now.